I'm so clingy. I need to control everything. If you're here, you probably watched my latest video, and I talked about how we have this need to control everything. And you can't control everything. The thing is, we lack true control. As much as we want to feel like we have control over things, we don't. We don't have control over a storm that might make you miss a flight and you might end up missing an appointment. But at the same time, that could even be a good thing. I watched a movie a few days ago in which this girl, she was supposed to go to her dad's wedding, which in and of itself is a kind of weird premise for a movie, but anyways. And she misses her flight, and she ends up meeting this dude on the airport, this British guy, because she's going to London. And yeah, it's, boy meets girl story, that kind of thing. But anyways, she did it because she missed her flight. So sometimes there are things that we want to control and we think we can control, but end up being better off by us not controlling them. At the end of the day, we lack true control, and we want to control things. Usually it stems from something in our childhoods because our parents or guardians weren't as good at controlling things as we wanted them to. And I know some of you might be thinking, yeah, but what about if they did control too much? Wouldn't we feel the same? Actually, usually it's the opposite. So when the parent controls too much, then you tend to be against control of any kind. And when the parents kind of leave you free range, you end up being a bit more of a control freak, because since you kind of feel like there's no one out there for you, even if they might be, at the end of the day, they might be there for you, but sometimes you don't feel like that. And that's the root of why you have this want to control everything. And here's the thing. This is actually an illusion that we can control things in the first place. And we can't control things because even our thoughts, sometimes there are thoughts that spark up in your head and you don't know where they're coming from. They might be things that are hidden very deep in your subconscious. And that's the thing that I see some interesting authors talking about, like Frederick Dodson, for instance, about making the subconscious conscious. So we have these layers of the psyche, and the subconscious is basically the deepest of the layers. So if you think of an ocean and the ocean floor, so we have the surface of the ocean, that would be the conscious, and then the ocean floor would be the subconscious, and all in between there's all the water. So the subconscious, if we take our time to sift a little bit, and if we try to revolve inside of our subconscious, then we might get some of the things that are the truly deepest reasons for why we do the things we do, why we think the things we think. Another thing is that free will, many students of psychology and decision architecture and other realms, other fields in this sense, would say that free will is actually another illusion, because we are too influenced by our environment, and also the decisions we make in our heads come before we actually rationalize our decisions. So this is another thing. For instance, I might think that I want to take a sip of this, and I might think this is a conscious decision, but actually in my brain, in my, not necessarily just the brain, because we have all of the neurons passing through our spine, and you guys get it. But anyways, we might think that at the same time that your brain rationalized taking a sip, that's the time in which you made the decision, but actually the decision comes before. And they've proved this with experiments. And of course this makes sense, because if you think of a life or death situation in which you're trying to get rid of a predator, or you're trying to hunt your prey, you don't have time to rationalize things. You need to do them by instinct. And that has to do with our reptilian brain, that has to do with the flight or flight mechanism. And it just makes sense. But yeah, at the end of the day, we basically rationalize our decisions after we actually made them. Even for people who are hyper rational, even for people like engineers, like lawyers, doctors, even for them, there are many things that come subconsciously. There are many things that come as an instinct. And that's pretty funny if you think of it, isn't it? That even for people that we consider intellectuals, and for some weird reason but our society values more the mind than what comes from here. And we try to rationalize everything. We try to put a scientific veil in front of things. But many things, at the end of the day, they come from the heart. And if anyone that's watching this is thinking, dude, this Gabe guy is some woo-woo, horoscope loving kind of person, I'm definitely not. I'm actually quite the opposite. I'm actually quite the hyper rational guy that's trying to look at things from another prism right now, lately, in the last few years, because I noticed that actually there are many things that are much deeper than we think, and what we call rationality is just us trying to rationalize things to try to make them comprehensible, and many things are simply incomprehensible for the human mind, for the human psyche, unfortunately, because for me it would be good if they were. I'm quite good at comprehending things that people deem hard to understand, and I know many of you are as well. But unfortunately, there are things that we simply can't understand, and we won't be able to understand them. Not on a short timeline, not on a long timeline, ever. And that's okay. Also, going back to decision architecture and the thing about free will, there's a very interesting book. It's called Nudge. And one of the things they talk about at the beginning of the book is about a cafeteria at a university or a school or a company. I don't remember right now. But basically, they changed the order of the items on the cafeteria. And just by making those small tweaks, and not even changing the prices or anything, just making small tweaks on the order in which you were presented with the items, just by having water, like bottles of water next to the cashier, for instance, they got people to get healthier choices just by changing the order. And that's very interesting, and that's what they call decision architecture. So you're designing the environment in a way that makes people make decisions in one way or another. Another place that you can see this easily is in the supermarket. So I don't know if you guys know, but actually the food companies and, well, the companies for everything that's on the supermarket, really, like, I don't know, soap, washing, like the thing you put on the washing machine, everything really. They pay a premium to be at eye level on the supermarket. And why is that? Because people, as you go walking with your cart on the supermarket, it's not like you're constantly looking up and down. You're mostly looking on this angle that's close to your eye level. And then companies like the big ones, like a Coca-Cola, like a Kellogg's, they will pay to be at the eye level of their ideal customers. And here is where things get weird. For instance, cereal companies, they don't need to be at the level of an adult. They're a bit lower, and they have the eyes of the characters on the cereal boxes. They're looking down. Why? If you're paying attention, it should be obvious, because if they're this high and they're looking down, and cereal companies, their target audience are kids, so the kid is this tall and the parent is this tall, they're looking at the kids, so the character's eyes are looking at the kids' eyes, and the kids are more prone to ask their parents to buy that cereal because it's at their eye level. So it gets crazier and crazier, and that's all about decision architecture. And that's a simple example of a supermarket, and you can only imagine if you take things to deeper levels of consciousness, right? So the movie The Matrix, they might not necessarily speak the truth in terms, and I know that some of you guys watching this might think that it does, but it might not necessarily be the truth that we are connected to a simulation, but in many ways we are. In many ways, our reality is shaped by things that are decision architecturized beforehand. And that's why I talked about in the beginning that free will is fake, it's an illusion. And also, let's not get into it, but also in politics and how democracy is largely a feeder. But I don't want to get too much into this. Anyways, back to our lack of true control. I'm here in Buenos Aires, and we're supposed to get on a flight to Mendoza. That's about 1,000 kilometers, about 2-hour flight. But they're having terrible thunderstorms, and apparently they're getting a little better right now. I'll show you. The skies seem to be opening up a little bit, but we're not sure how they will be tomorrow, and that's the day that we're supposed to fly. And tomorrow, in this case, is on Wednesday, March 13th, 2024. And by the time I put this video out, we'll probably have gotten in the flight anyways. But what I was saying is that we can't control everything, and there are things that are greater force, and one of those things are weather. One of those things is weather, obviously, but nature is just one of them. There are many things that you can control. There are many things that are out of your locus of control, and you should just not bother about them. If you can influence them in a way, by all means, bother about them. But if you're just going to let your reptilian brain be rattled by it and not do anything about it, and just get emotional and anxious and make people's lives around you worse because you're feeling anxious about them, dude, just stop. Just cold turkey, stop watching the news, stop watching them, because they're not making you any good. And There are things that you can control. By all means, control them. Do whatever you can. There are many things that you just can't control, and just forget about it. Like I said in my last video, and I'm not sure if I made it clear enough, there are things that it's better to just put on God's hands and leave it to God's plan, because it will just make you anxious and it will make you overthink if you don't. And that's not what we want. What we want is to have that energy to harness and use it for the things that we can control, to use it to architect our own environment so that we can make the good decisions easier for us. And if you guys want to, please comment, and I'll talk more about this in further videos, because it's a subject that I really like to talk about, and I find it very, very interesting. And yeah, just human psychology and group dynamics, they're so interesting. But the gist of this is, stop trying to control everything. Focus on the things you can control. There are things even within you that you can't control totally, but by making the subconscious conscious, by bringing from here, because what you feel, your gut feelings, what you feel in your chest, your heart, are many times a demonstration of the subconscious. So bring them up here, and this is where you can deal with them better and where you can get rid of them. And by doing this, you'll finally be able to control the things that you can control, and the rest of them, forget about it.